Hi, my name is Jason Garfoot, Senior Applications Engineer here at 3M. This is the third video in our series on texture matching chip guard and rock guard to OEM textures. So this is the video where we're going to put everything together. So we talked earlier about matching the actual texture. We looked at things like building an actual spray out board with the settings you use to achieve that texture. We then made some of those textures ourselves by trying those settings. And then we did transitions where we looked at the different ways in which this rock guard or chip guard transitions out, both texture-wise and to your normal flat panel. So today what we're going to do is actually replicate a texture that was put on this board that has a few different types of transitions on it. But before we get started, there's just a couple things we want to mention. The first is make sure you're always wearing your proper PPE. In this video, you'll see I'll be wearing a PAPR system, nitrile gloves, a full paint suit, as well as safety glasses. The other thing is this video is intended for professionals, so the people out in the shops actually doing the work. If you want any warranty information or more safety information, be sure to click the link in the description below. That being said, we can jump right into our texture matching for today. So this is replicating an OEM texture, and we can use the tools that we built in earlier videos to figure out how we're going to go about this process. When looking at this texture, I see it goes from very coarse to more of a medium type texture. The other thing we can do is actually use the panels we've made to check and verify to see where we're at. So I can see on the bottom it's very close to our coarsest texture that we sprayed out. As we get towards the top, it looks like we're finer than that one. So it looks like we're in between our fine and our medium texture. So that should give us good starting points on how we want to set up our spray gun. The next thing we want to check is our actual transition line, so where our rock guard or chip guard ends. We can do the same thing by using the panel that we made in an earlier video with all the different types of transition lines and see which one matches up the best. So I can see with our hard transition line, it's just going to be too much of an abrupt transition. It looks like our second and third transitions are a lot closer to what we're looking for. If you haven't watched the other videos, to achieve more of a slight transition, so close to our hard transition but with a softer edge, we can use something like foam masking tape or back masking with paper and tape. So it looks like this one is an abrupt enough stop where we should be able to achieve that transition by using our foam tape. So what we'll do next is go ahead and apply our foam tape at about the same transition height on our new panel that say we were replacing this with on a vehicle. So I'm going to go ahead and get my foam transition tape laid out on my panel. The other thing I noticed when looking at our transition panel that we made earlier is it's kind of in between these two. Now I know I used the foam edge pressed down pretty firmly for this one, and I know for this one it was rolled paper. So I can kind of get a texture in between those two just by using a little bit of tape. So what I'm going to do with this tape is apply it to the top of our foam tape. And then all I have to do is pull up on this to get the edge of our foam to move just a little bit away from the panel. Now with that, our transition line should be set. All we have left to do now is to just mask off the rest of the panel to prevent any overspray, and we should be ready to start texture matching. All right, so now we have our new panel all masked up and ready to go. I've also taped off this bottom section so I can test my texture coarseness before we apply it to the panel. So as we can see on the one we have to match, we're going from a medium texture down to a very coarse. So what I like to do is spray my finest texture first, so that way I can apply my coarser texture over the top. The reason I do that is if I started with my coarse and accidentally went too high, it's very hard to come back for that. I would have to let it fully dry and then sand it down to get rid of that texture, or take some sort of solvent and immediately clean off the whole panel and start over. If I start with my finer texture, I can spray the entire panel with that and then gradually build up my coarser texture until it matches this nice long transition. So the first thing I'm gonna do is jump in with my medium texture and spray that from the top of the transition line down. Now I'm gonna refer back to my chart that I built earlier and see that for a medium texture, I'm gonna wanna go around 10 PSI with my performance spray gun. I'm gonna go about 2 turns out on fluid, and on my spray pattern, I'm gonna go out about a full turn. That'll give me a nice tight pattern that I can control easily. The other thing I wanna do is make sure that my HO valve is open, so my cup is pressurized and this higher viscosity fluid will be able to come out easily. Now I'm ready to go ahead and spray a test piece to make sure my texture matches how it does up there. So after doing a test pattern, all I had to do is change my fluid knob slightly to match the OEM texture that I'm trying to replicate. So now that my gun is all set up, I'm gonna go ahead and spray my first coat. So with my first coat, I got good full coverage of my panel, so I know that it's protected properly. My transition line is done and my finest texture is sprayed. So all I have to do now is a little bit more coverage and then slowly build up my texture on the bottom part of my panel. We're gonna give this just a minute or so to flash off before we go ahead and spray our next coat. Now that this is flashed off for a minute or two, I'm ready to go ahead and apply my next coat. After each step, I like to compare back to my OEM panel to make sure we're matching properly. So on this one, even though I know my texture's right, I see on my factory panel, there's still a bit more coverage than I have. So I'm gonna go ahead with that same medium texture and apply one more coat to get it to match. So after my second coat, I can see that everything matches up perfectly to my factory panel. So now we get to start building some texture. So I'm going to change the settings on my spray gun to get a coarser texture. Typically to do that, you're going to want to drop your pressure down and increase the amount of fluid going through. This is going to create a larger droplet size that's going to build that heavier texture. So I'm going to go ahead and make those adjustments, and then I'm going to spray on my test panel area to make sure my texture matches. I'm not going to go for the coarsest texture yet. I'm basically going to look at the next section down on my panel and see that it's between a super coarse and a medium texture. So I'm going to try to replicate that now. After playing with my gun adjustments, I've now achieved the texture that's on the middle part of the panel over there. And just like before, I'm gonna work from the middle section all the way down, copying the texture transition that's built into the OEM panel. So now we have a nice medium texture gradient coming from the finer medium. All that's left to do is go to our very coarse setting and finish the bottom of our panel. So in order to do that, I'll have to drop the air pressure a little bit more and probably open my fluid tip just a touch. Again, I'm gonna fine tune on the spray area I have down here before I apply this to my final panel. So now I have my nice heavy texture ready to go. I'm going to finish by copying that transition blend on my factory panel, and we should be finished up. So now after our third and final coat, we've got everywhere from our nice medium fine texture all the way up to our super coarse texture, matching our OEM finish. The last thing to do is to pull our tape to make sure that our final transition line matches our factory. If that matches, we should be good to finish up. And there we go. It looks like using the foam tape matched our factory edge perfect. Our texture matches from top to bottom. We have both gradients, our texture gradient, and then our actual finish gradient going into our OEM surface. So that's how you match using all the tools that we learned in the previous videos. First, adjusting our gun to get texture, and then using different tools as far as spray gun setup, different kinds of tape and paper to achieve different transition gradients. So this is how you put it all together. Again, I would always recommend making these little things to help you in your shop. It'll really save a lot of time. Having those to refer back to, you'll know immediately how you taped that in the past, and especially when it comes to texture matching. There's so many variations today that come from the OEM manufacturers that it's nice to have spray out cards. And it doesn't have to be this big. You can use the typical color library type cards that painters are using today. Putting your different settings in, spraying texture panels, and make sure you put a sticker on the back with all your settings like we've done on this larger panel. That way you have a quick reference to refer back to. Thank you for watching our video. If you found this content enjoyable and useful, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. For more content like this, be sure to check out Collision Repair Academy. In the comments section of this video, if you have a certain OEM texture that you're trying to match, be sure to type it into that comment section, and maybe we can use that for a future video. As always, thanks for checking out the video, and we'll see you next time.